An alien armada invaded Earth and vanished without a trace. The morning began like any other Monday across the globe. Children were getting dressed for school. While their parents rushed through breakfast routines, office workers were boarding trains and buses in cities from New York to Mumbai, from London to Sao Paulo, and farmers were already working in fields under the same sun that had risen over Earth for billions of years. But none of them knew that high above in the cold darkness of space, something was watching them. Something that had traveled across the galaxy with one single purpose: to claim Earth as their new territory and reduce humanity to nothing more than a footnote in galactic history. Commander Zephyrus of the Valdorian Empire stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Worldbreaker, staring at the small blue planet through reinforced viewing ports, his 6 arms crossed behind his back in a gesture of supreme confidence. Because in his 300 years of military service, he had conquered 42 star systems without losing a single battle, and Earth would be number 43, another primitive world whose inhabitants didn't even know they were about to become extinct. "How pathetic," he said to his second-in-command, Captain Nexus, as they watched Earth's rotation through their advanced telescopes. "They still use chemical rockets to barely escape their own atmosphere, while we've mastered faster-than-light travel for millennia. They're insects playing with fire while we control the very stars themselves." Captain Nexus nodded with cold amusement, his scaled face showing the kind of cruel smile that had terrified 1,000 worlds. "Sir, our scouts report that their most advanced weapons are nuclear devices that can't even penetrate our basic shields. Shall we begin the bombardment immediately, or would you prefer to let them see us coming first?" "Oh, I want them to see us," Zephyrus replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I want every human on that pathetic little world to look up at their sky and understand that their time is over. I want them to know fear before they know death, because fear makes the conquest so much sweeter." With that command, the massive Valdorian invasion fleet began to decloak, ship after ship materializing in Earth's solar system like metallic phantoms emerging from a nightmare. There were over 30,000 vessels in total, each one bristling with weapons that could crack continents and boil oceans. The smallest fighter craft were larger than Earth's biggest buildings, and the command ships were the size of small moons, their hulls gleaming with energy shields that could deflect anything humanity might throw at them. On Earth, the first sign of trouble came at the Mauna Kea Observatory in Hawaii, where Dr. Elena Rodriguez was conducting routine deep space observations when her instruments suddenly went haywire, displaying readings that made absolutely no sense at first. She thought it was equipment failure because the numbers were impossible. There were too many large objects appearing in the outer solar system too quickly, and they were all moving in perfect formation toward Earth. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself as she ran diagnostic after diagnostic. But the results were always the same. Something massive was coming, and it was coming fast. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers and called her supervisor, Dr. Michael Chen, who was at home enjoying his morning coffee. "Dr. Chen, you need to get to the observatory immediately," she said, her voice barely controlled. "We have a situation that's completely outside normal parameters, and it's getting worse by the minute." Within an hour, the observatory was buzzing with activity as astronomers and technicians worked frantically to understand what they were seeing on their screens. But the more data they collected, the more terrifying the picture became, because the objects weren't natural, they were artificial. They were ships, and there were thousands of them. Dr. Chen stood before a wall of monitors showing the approaching fleet, his face pale, but his scientific mind still working. Elena runs spectral analysis on their hull composition and tried to determine their propulsion systems. "We need to understand what we're dealing with before we alert the authorities." But it was already too late, because observatories around the world were reporting the same impossible readings. And within hours, every space agency on Earth was in full emergency mode. The International Space Station confirmed visual contact with the alien fleet, describing them as impossibly large vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And NASA's Deep Space Monitoring Network calculated that the fleet would reach Earth's orbit within 72 hours. In the Pentagon's Crisis Management Center, General Patricia Hayes stood before a room full of military leaders and government officials, her uniform crisp, despite having been awakened at 3 in the morning for this emergency briefing. "Ladies and gentlemen, She began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to say. We are facing what can only be described as an invasion force of unprecedented size and technological superiority. The room erupted in urgent whispers and concerned murmurs, but General Hayes raised her hand for silence. Our best estimates put their fleet at over 30,000 individual vessels, the smallest of which is approximately the size of our largest aircraft carriers. Their technology appears to be centuries, if not millennia, ahead of ours, and based on their current trajectory and speed, they will reach Earth in less than 3 days. President Sarah Martinez, who was attending via secure video link from Camp David, leaned forward in her chair, the weight of command evident in her tired eyes. General, what are our defensive options? General Hayes took a deep breath before answering. Madam President, to be completely honest, our options are extremely limited. Our entire nuclear arsenal wouldn't significantly damage even one of their smaller ships. Our space-based defenses are practically non-existent, and our Air Force, while formidable against human technology, would be like paper airplanes against these craft. So you're telling me we're defenseless? The President asked, though she already knew the answer. Not defenseless, ma'am, General Hayes replied, but severely outmatched. This isn't a conventional military engagement. This is an extinction-level event, and we need to prepare for the possibility that humanity's time on Earth may be coming to an end. Meanwhile, high above in the command center of the Worldbreaker, Commander Zephyrus was reviewing tactical reports from his scout ships with growing amusement. So the humans have detected us, he said to his gathered officers, and they're scurrying around like frightened rodents trying to find a way to defend their little mud ball. How delightfully predictable. Captain Nexus pulled up holographic displays showing Earth's military installations. Sir, our intelligence indicates they possess primitive nuclear weapons and conventional explosives, but nothing that poses even the slightest threat to our shielding systems. Their space-based assets are laughably weak, and their ground forces are equipped with projectile weapons that couldn't penetrate our personal armor. Excellent, Zephyrus replied, his multiple eyes gleaming with anticipation. Then we proceed with the standard conquest protocol: orbital bombardment of major population centers, followed by ground forces to secure strategic resources. I want this campaign completed within one planetary rotation. But as the Valdorian fleet moved closer to Earth, something unexpected began to happen across the planet. Seismic monitoring stations started detecting unusual underground activity. Not earthquakes exactly, but something else. Something deeper and more systematic, as if massive structures buried far beneath the surface were slowly awakening. Dr. Sarah Kim, a seismologist at the United States Geological Survey, was the first to notice the pattern. These readings don't match any known geological phenomena, she reported to her colleagues as she studied data streaming in from monitoring stations worldwide. The vibrations are too regular, too coordinated. It's almost like the Earth itself is responding to something. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, the Mariana Trench monitoring station recorded something that defied explanation. Massive objects were moving on the ocean floor, things that had been motionless for so long they had been classified as geological features. But now they were shifting, changing position, and emitting low-frequency sounds that could be felt rather than heard. At the same time in Antarctica, research stations reported that ancient ice formations were cracking and shifting, revealing structures underneath that clearly weren't natural black, metallic surfaces that seemed to absorb all light in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they belonged to a form of mathematics that human minds weren't designed to comprehend. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, back at Mauna Kea, was now coordinating with observatories worldwide when she noticed something disturbing about Earth's magnetic field. The magnetosphere is fluctuating in ways I've never seen before, she reported during an emergency video conference with scientists around the globe. It's not weakening, it's reorganizing itself like the planet is preparing for something. Professor James Wright from Cambridge University, who specialized in planetary magnetism, studied the data with growing concern. Elena, you're right, but it's not just reorganizing, it's strengthening in specific areas, as if Earth is creating focused magnetic shields. But that's impossible. Planetary magnetic fields don't work that way. Unless, Dr. Rodriguez said slowly as a terrifying possibility occurred to her, unless something is controlling them, something with technology far beyond our understanding. As the alien fleet entered Earth's outer atmosphere, people around the world could see them with the naked eye dark shapes that blocked out portions of the sky like mechanical storm clouds that cast shadows over entire countries. The ships were so massive that they created their own weather patterns as they displaced air, and their presence in the atmosphere caused auroras to appear even in regions where they had never been seen before. Commander Zephyrus stood on his bridge, watching Earth grow larger in the viewing ports, his confidence absolute as he prepared to give the order that would end human civilization. Weapons officers prepare orbital bombardment sequence, target all major population centers and military installations. I want this world cleansed of intelligent life within the hour. But as his weapons officer reached for the firing controls, something impossible happened. Every screen on the bridge went dark, not offline, not damaged, but displaying a deep, impenetrable blackness that seemed to swallow light itself. And from that darkness came a sound that penetrated the ship's hull and reached into the minds of every Valdorian aboard. It wasn't a voice exactly, and it wasn't in any language they recognized, but somehow every alien on every ship in the fleet understood its meaning perfectly. You are not welcome here. Leave now while you still can. Commander Zephyrus felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: genuine fear, because the message hadn't come through their communication systems. It had come from somewhere else, somewhere impossible, and it carried with it the weight of something unimaginably ancient and powerful. "Report," he shouted to his bridge crew, but none of them could answer because they were all staring at their instruments in shock and terror as every system on the ship began to malfunction. "Sir," his chief engineer finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper, "all our systems are being overridden by something we can't identify. Our weapons are powering down. Our engines are losing efficiency, and our navigation systems are displaying coordinates that don't exist." On Earth, the changes were becoming visible to everyone who looked up at the sky. The alien ships that had seemed so menacing and unstoppable were now flickering like images on a broken television screen, their solid metallic hulls becoming translucent as if they were fading from reality itself. At the same time, the ocean began to glow with a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with something deep below the surface, and mountains around the world started to emit a low humming sound that could be felt in the bones of every living creature. The very ground beneath people's feet was vibrating with energy that seemed to come from the planet's core. Dr. Kim at the USGS watched her instruments in amazement as seismic activity increased dramatically, but not in a destructive way. "It's like the Earth is waking up," she said to her colleagues, "as if something that's been sleeping for millions of years is finally opening its eyes." And she was closer to the truth than she knew, because deep beneath the surface in caverns that existed before the first complex life forms evolved on Earth, ancient guardians were indeed awakening machines that weren't built by any known civilization, but had been waiting in dormancy for exactly this moment when their world would need protection. These guardians had no names because names were concepts created by younger species. They had no leaders because they served a purpose older than politics or hierarchy. And they had no weapons in the conventional sense, because they were integrated into the very fabric of the planet itself. They were Earth's immune system, its final defense against threats that conventional military force could never address. High above in the dying alien fleet, Commander Zephyrus watched helplessly as his ships began to fade from existence. Not destroyed, not damaged, but simply ceasing to be, as if reality itself was rejecting their presence. His last coherent thought before his flagship dissolved into nothingness was a question that would never be answered. What is this world? One by one, the massive Valdorian warships disappeared from Earth's skies. Not crashing, not exploding, but fading away like morning mist touched by sunlight. Within hours, the entire invasion fleet was gone. 30,000 vessels and millions of alien warriors simply erased from existence, leaving no debris, no energy signatures. No evidence they had ever been there, except for the memories of the humans who had witnessed their arrival and impossible departure. The ancient structures that had begun to emerge from Earth's depths slowly sank back down into the oceans and mountains, returning the planet to its normal appearance. But something fundamental had changed in the relationship between Earth and its human inhabitants, because now they knew they were not alone and they were not defenseless. In observatories around the world, scientists worked frantically to understand what had happened, but their instruments showed nothing unusual. No energy readings, no magnetic anomalies, no sign that Earth had just effortlessly defeated the largest military force in galactic history. "It's like it never happened," Dr. Rodriguez said to her team as they reviewed data that showed a perfectly normal day. "But we all saw it. We all remember it." Dr. Chen nodded slowly, his scientific worldview fundamentally altered by what he had witnessed. "Maybe we're not supposed to understand it. Maybe some things are beyond human comprehension, and maybe that's for the best." Meanwhile, across the galaxy in the halls of power where alien empires plotted conquest and calculated the value of distant worlds, a new entry appeared in classified databases that would change the course of interstellar politics forever. Earth designation, Forbidden Zone, do not approach under any circumstances. The Valdorian High Command convened an emergency session, trying to understand how their most powerful fleet had vanished without sending a single distress signal. The implications were staggering, because if Earth could eliminate 30,000 warships without apparent effort, then no force in the known galaxy could threaten it. Perhaps they were destroyed by some unknown superweapon, suggested one council member, desperately searching for a rational explanation. "No," replied the chief military analyst, his voice heavy with dread. "Destroyed fleets leave wreckage, energy signatures, some trace of the battle. This fleet simply stopped existing, as if it had never been launched." "Then what are you suggesting?" asked the High Commander. "I'm suggesting that Earth isn't what we thought it was," the analyst replied carefully. "It's not a primitive world with a young species. It's something else, something ancient. Something that was there long before any of us reached for the stars, and something that doesn't want visitors." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They had sent their greatest military asset against what appeared to be an easy target, only to lose it completely to a force they couldn't understand, couldn't fight, and couldn't even prove existed. Back on Earth, life slowly returned to normal. Children went back to school, adults returned to work, and the news cycle moved on to other stories. But in the classified files of every major government, a new protocol was established for phenomena that defied conventional explanation, and at the top of that list was a single entry. Date classified, time classified, event designation, Guardian Protocol, activated threat level cosmic. Dr. Rodriguez continued her work at Mauna Kea, but now she watched the stars with different eyes, knowing that Earth held secrets far deeper than any human science had discovered. She would spend the rest of her career searching for traces of what had happened that day, but she would find only hints and whispers, because some mysteries are meant to remain hidden. Years passed, and the story of the vanishing alien fleet became classified information, then legend, then myth, filed away in government archives that few would ever access. But the guardians of Earth returned to their patient vigil, sleeping, but always ready, waiting for the next threat that might require their intervention. Because Earth was not just another planet where life had evolved by chance, it was a fortress built by forces that existed before the first galaxies formed, defended by power that could reshape reality itself, and those defenses would remain active for as long as threats existed in the cold spaces between worlds. The message was clear to any species advanced enough to detect it. Earth is protected by forces beyond your understanding. Approach at your own extinction. And in the depths of space where radio signals carry news of conquest and defeat across impossible distances, a new transmission began its journey to distant stars, a simple warning in frequencies that every spacefaring civilization could decode. Avoid the third planet around Sol. Total fleet loss, confirmed threat level unknown. Commander Zephyrus's final log entry was never recovered because it had been erased along with his ship, but if it had survived, it would have contained one desperate message. Earth is defended by something older than the stars. Warn all fleets to stay away. But there were no fleets left to warn because the Valdorian Empire's military might have been reduced to nothing in the span of a few hours, and the tale of their disappearance would echo across the galaxy for millennia, a cautionary story about the world that looked defenseless but possessed guardians that could unmake reality itself. And on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, human beings continued their daily lives, unaware of the cosmic forces that watched over them from the depths below. While somewhere deep in Earth's core, ancient sentinels settled back into their eternal watch, waiting patiently for the next threat that would dare to challenge their world. Because Earth had always been special, not because of the humans who lived on its surface, but because of what slept beneath protecting it. And when that sleeping force awakened, even the mightiest empires in the galaxy learned that some worlds are not meant to be conquered, and some defenses are not meant to be tested. 5 years had passed since the day the sky filled with alien warships, and humanity learned they were not alone in the universe, but the memory of that morning still haunted every person who had witnessed it. Though the world had returned to its normal rhythm of daily life, something fundamental had changed in the way humans looked at their planet and their place among the stars. Dr. Elena Rodriguez now served as the director of the Global Defense Monitoring Network, a secret international organization tasked with watching for signs of future alien contact. She spent her days coordinating with observatories worldwide, analyzing deep space signals and maintaining the classified database of what had become known simply as the event. But every night she would stand outside her home in Hawaii and look up at the stars, wondering if Earth's ancient guardians were still watching, still waiting. The governments of the world had agreed to keep the truth classified, knowing that revealing the existence of hostile alien empires and Earth's mysterious defenders would cause global panic. Instead, they had created cover stories about solar flares and atmospheric anomalies to explain the strange phenomena that had been witnessed by millions. But in the deepest vaults of every major nation, detailed records were kept of humanity's first contact with the cosmos. President Martinez had established the Cosmic Defense Initiative, a black budget program that brought together the world's brightest scientists and military strategists to study what little evidence remained from the vanished fleet. They had found fragments of alien technology that had somehow survived the mass disappearance. Tiny pieces of metal that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and energy readings that defied every known law of physics. Dr. Sarah Kim had become the world's leading expert on what she called planetary consciousness theory, the idea that Earth itself was a living entity with its own intelligence and defense mechanisms. Her research had taken her to remote locations around the globe, where she documented evidence of the ancient structures that had briefly emerged from the depths underground chambers, filled with technology that predated human civilization by millions of years. But the most significant change was in humanity's perspective on their world, because now every earthquake, every volcanic eruption, every unusual weather pattern was viewed through the lens of possibility that Earth was not just a ball of rock and water, but something far more complex, and where environmental protection had become a global priority, not just for the sake of preserving nature, but because people understood instinctively that their planet's health was connected to their survival in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. In the classified files of the Cosmic Defense Initiative, there was a single document that summed up everything they had learned about that day when 30,000 alien warships had vanished without a trace. The document was titled Guardian Protocol Assessment, and its final paragraph read, "Earth possesses defensive capabilities of unknown origin and unlimited scope. These defenses appear to be autonomous, requiring no human activation or control, and demonstrate technology that exceeds our current understanding. By several orders of magnitude, recommendation maintain planetary environmental stability and continue monitoring for future contact attempts." Commander Zephyrus had become a legend in the wrong way across the galaxy. His name was whispered in the dark corners of military academies as a cautionary tale about overconfidence and the dangers of underestimating unknown worlds. The Valdorian Empire had never recovered from the loss of their entire invasion fleet and had retreated to the core systems, becoming isolationist and fearful, while other alien civilizations quietly updated their star charts to mark Earth as a forbidden zone. The cosmic community had learned to give humanity's solar system a wide berth, not out of respect for human military might, but out of terror of whatever had made 30,000 warships disappear without firing a shot. Trade routes were redirected, exploration missions avoided the region, and even the most aggressive expansionist empires marked Earth as permanently off limits. Because the message was clear to anyone who had witnessed the Valdorian fleet's fate, some worlds were protected by forces beyond conventional understanding. Dr. Rodriguez often wondered if the Guardians were still active, if they were monitoring Earth's skies for new threats, or if they had returned to whatever deep slumber they had awakened from, She had no way of knowing, because the ancient structures had left no trace of their existence, except in the memories of those who had seen them, briefly emerge from the depths. But sometimes on quiet nights, when the observatory was empty, she would feel a presence, something vast and patient, watching over the world with eyes older than time itself. The children who had been born after the event grew up in a world subtly different from the one their parents had known. They learned about space exploration with the understanding that the universe was populated by other intelligent species. They studied environmental science with the knowledge that their planet was somehow alive and aware, and they looked at the stars not just with wonder, but with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are protected by something unimaginably powerful. And so humanity continued its journey through the cosmos, forever changed by that morning when the sky filled with alien warships and the Earth itself rose to defend its children. They were no longer alone in the universe, but they were also no longer afraid, because they had learned the greatest truth of all, that Earth was not just their home, it was their guardian, and it would protect them from any threat that dared to approach their small blue world among the stars. The ancient guardians remained vigilant in the depths, waiting patiently for the next challenge to their world, and watching over the species that had evolved on their surface with the eternal patience of forces that measured time in geological ages. They had no names because names were for finite beings. They had no desires because purpose was enough, and they had no fear because they were fear itself to those who would threaten their world. And in the cold depths of space, where the light of distant suns barely reached, a simple message continued to propagate across the galaxy, carried by quantum entanglement and faster-than-light communication networks spreading from one star system to another, like a whispered warning that would echo through the cosmos for eternity. Earth is defended, stay away. What did you think of Earth's mysterious guardians? Did this story give you chills when the ancient defenders awakened to protect humanity? The universe is full of incredible HFY tales where humanity proves that we're stronger than we appear. Mash that like button if you love to sing an alien armada get completely erased by Earth's ancient protectors. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more mind-blowing HFY stories where humanity always finds a way to survive and thrive. Comment below and tell me, what do you think these ancient guardians really are? Would you want to know if Earth has other hidden defenses? What alien threat should humanity face next? Share this story with friends who love sci-fi. They need to know that Earth is more protected than we ever imagined. Your support means everything. Every like, comment, and subscription helps me bring you more incredible HFY content that celebrates humanity's potential among the stars. What story should I tell next? Drop your suggestions in the comments. I read every single one.